Welcome to another episode of the Wandering Watercolor. Let's paint. So today we are painting the first page of the Jungle Animals Watercolor Coloring book that I make. This first page is a jaguar. Excuse me. And as always, you just need a brush, some paint, any paint works. This is just kind of like the palette that I've been working on since people keep asking me to continue to make my own paint. This is just a simplified version of it. Have a porcelain plate so that you can mix your colors onto it. This is just a little soap dish that I have. You can honestly use anything. It doesn't have to be a soap dish, just whatever you have. White porcelain is good just because you can see the colors as you're mixing them. Scrap piece of paper, preferably watercolor paper that you can just test your paint on. It doesn't have to be watercolor paper, you just need to be able to just kind of see what you're mixing. And just paper towel, just so you can dry your brush as you go along. On the side I have 2 jars of water. And again, any brush works. So the very first thing that we want to do is we want to mix the base color. But we're just going to start with yellow. So whatever palette you're using, just grab some yellow. And the reason for that is, I've got a little bit of a blue paint in there. So what we want to do is, I'm going to mix up a bunch of yellow. I'm just grabbing water, just adding water here so that I have more of a mixture to play with. And then getting a bunch of pigment. And then once I have that, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and start laying down the colors. Here for the face, for the muzzle, I'm going to leave more of a white space going down here all the way down to the front of the chest. So I'm just going to kind of go around like this. And at this point, this is considered more of a flat wash, or kind of like blocking in the color. We're not really doing any shading or any texture. We just want to have that base color established. Just a little bit. For the ears, I'm just going to go kind of like on the sides, like that, on the edges. And then just continue filling that in. That's all we're doing. We're not doing anything fancy, just kind of filling that in. Just remember to leave that little gap here in the front for the standard markings of a jaguar. And once we have all of that filled in, then what we'll do is we'll grab a little bit of water. Oop, a little bit went on my paper there. So I'm going to grab a little bit of water so I have a little more mixture to work with. Add a little more of the base yellow color, and then just add a little bit of red. Whatever red you have is fine. Excuse me. So we're mixing it so that we're pushing it more a little bit towards the orange side. Not a lot though. We're also going to grab a little bit of sepia, or if you're using my palette, if by the time you're seeing this video, if my palette is out, then what you can do is, one of them is burnt umber and the other one I was trying to make more of like a sepia. So a more earthy brown, and then just a more saturated brown, or a lighter brown. Just grab a little bit of that one and mix it in along with a little bit of red. And whatever palette you have should, oh see, that's way too much red. Whatever palette you have should have brown in it. So if you add a little more brown and red to the yellow, that'll work just fine. And so now I'm going to use my test piece of paper. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's good. So here's what I'll do. I'm going to start laying down some of the color down here. Granted, some of the marks that I made are still a little wet. That's okay. But basically what I'm doing here is kind of adding a little bit of that orangish mixture that we have, which we're also using as a shadow. So it gives, it has a double function. We're gonna add a little bit here like that to establish that three-dimensional look. You know, there's a little bit of a shadow in the face that recedes backwards where the eye goes. So we're just trying to add a little more dimensionality to this. And also the light is coming in this way, so we're laying down colors to establish kind of like the form through emphasizing the shadows. What I did here between the eyes, I'm going to rinse my brush and then fade out some of the top and a little bit of the bottom here of that marking. And then continue to do that a little bit on the bottom, just add a little more down here, a little bit here, maybe a little bit where the ear is, and then rinse my brush. And then fade out some of those colors. Fade them out like that. And then rinse my brush. So while we let all of this dry, then the next thing we can do is work on the plant. It's kind of like a large plant that the leopard is standing behind. So what we'll do is we'll grab some green. I really like using yellow green for, and obviously green is takes up the most space on the color spectrum or color wheel. And so green is the color that has the largest amount of different types of shades to mix in with it. So you can add a little bit of yellow or a little bit of green, but what I'm going to do is, if you're following along with the same palette as me, or even if you have a completely different palette, just grab whatever green you have and then lay down some marks, kind of like on the side that's further away, more on the right side, because since the light is coming in from the left. So what we're doing here is we're laying down some color, and it doesn't have to be perfect. You can see I'm kind of very loose about it. Here on this one, since it's kind of bent backwards, we're just going to add like this, and then a little more like this. So what I'll do next is I'll rinse my brush, just grab some yellow just straight from your palette, and then just cover in. And then just try to blend in, maybe picking up some of the edge of the green that you already laid down, and just going along like that to give some variance in the color. So we have green, but we also have a yellow green that leans a lot more towards the yellow. I'm gonna rinse my brush. And then you can always feel a little bit with your finger. This is still wet. I'm just gonna let it keep drying. While that's drying, I'm just gonna go ahead and grab some of the blue. This is kind of like a cerulean blue. I really like this color. The reason I mixed it up like this is because I think this is like the perfect sky color. And then if you want to dull it down or do anything else with it, really, you can always just add some of the other colors depending on what your purpose is. But since I really like how this looks, all I'm doing is adding a little bit of water to the mixture. And then we're gonna go ahead and start laying down the color around the sides like that. And if some of it bleeds out, if some of the color that it's already in there bleeds out, that's okay. And so what we're doing here is just kind of pulling it out away from the leopard. I'm gonna wet my brush a little bit and then just kind of pressing down against the paper to add a little bit of that texture, make it look a little more artsy. And so as we're moving further away, kind of getting that texture in there like that, and getting a little more paint and continuing the same exact thing, just like that. Add a little more paint going on this side. See, I added a little too much pigment. That's okay. I'm gonna add a little more water to my brush and then just fade that out, just like that. Get a little more water, maybe a little more paint. Pressing up against the paper. And just fading all those out like that. And dry off my brush a bit. I can always use that to pick up a little bit of the excess color if I think it looks a little too strong. Just going like this around the ear. And that's the same for any part of the painting. If you feel like it looks too strong, too much paint on there, just rinse your brush, dry it off, and then pick up some of that excess. And it looks a little better balanced that way. Okay, next what I want to do is grab a little more of that lighter brown that we used earlier, and I'm just adding some water, and I want to have a very faint color like that, just so that there's a color, a base tone to add onto the whiter part, kind of like of the markings here. Part of the reason for that is even though this part of the markings of the leopard would be white, they're not pure white. Partially because it's a wild animal, it's outside, probably get some dirt on it, on itself, and then also this part is more in shadow. So whenever we lay down the shadow layers, we don't want the contrast between the white and the colored parts to be so strong. So we're adding a base color in here that's just a very slight color. And while we're at it, we're going to grab that same color and then add a little bit of red to it. And so this mixture, maybe a little more red, just a little bit. I'm always very careful with red because it's such a strong color. It tends to overpower a lot. And so that mixture, we can go ahead and lay that down for the nose, kind of like a pink mixture. It's a very subtle, not a very strong pink, just kind of a subtle pink. And then also fill in the ears like that. Okay, that's perfect. And while that dries, then we can come back down here where the plant is and add a little more detail, especially down here for the shadow. Just kind of like add a little more texture. If you want to fade out any of the markings that you make, all you need to do is rinse your brush, dry it off, and then go to where the edge of the shadow is, and then just pull it out like that with a dried, rinsed brush, and it'll soften those shadows. Sometimes I like to leave more of a textured shadow, just because I think it looks more interesting. But it's entirely up to you how you render it. Keep in mind, everything I'm showing you is basically just a suggestion. I do like it when people tag me on social media and show me how they've done their own rendition. It's always very interesting to see. I'm going to rinse my brush. The next thing that I want to do before moving on to the shadow layers is I want to grab the mixture that we did earlier for the coat, and then just double down on some of that. Go in again like here, like that, like that, a little bit in the front of the face, maybe a little bit around the eye. Just emphasize some of those markings. They don't have to be, doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want that variability just because it makes the whole piece look more interesting. And then rinsing my brush, drying it off, and then going in to fade out some of that. Like that. And next, actually, I want to go ahead and also add a little bit of yellow. The yellow is going to be just to emphasize the yellow parts, really. So a little bit more yellow, close to where the orange markings are. And the reason for that is I don't want just the orange to be a strong color, and I don't want just the yellow to be a strong color, but if you have a little bit of variability in both of them, and then having the really light yellow kind of like as a highlight, makes the entire piece more interesting to look at. Maybe a little more yellow over here. Like that. I'm gonna rinse my brush. And so the next step would be to mix up a color for the shadows. And for that, we'll need, let's see, I think this was, so this is kind of turquoise. This is blue, I think, or wait, let me rinse my brush. So we have dark blue over here. The thing that makes it difficult when you do, if you ever made your own paint, when you use a lot of pigment, when you put a ton of pigment, because I really try to make my paint highly pigmented, it ends up being the darker colors end up being a little difficult to tell apart. But okay, so what I want is the purple. So whatever palette you're using, just grab some purple, mix it in a little bit with the color that we used for the coat, the orange portion, and then also grab a little bit of the lighter brown, kind of mix it all together, and then make sure to add water so it's not too strong, because the water helps dilute the pigment. And so you're wanting something like that, something that kind of looks like that. And so what we'll do with that is, first thing is, I do want to fill in where the nostrils are, like that. Also a little bit around the eye, both of them on the upper portion of the eye, on the inside of the ears, just a little bit, and that's more towards one side than the other, just to kind of give it that three-dimensional look. Same on the other side, like that. And rinsing my brush, drying it off a little bit so I can fade out that edge. There we go. And so while that's drying, once it's dry, we can go in for the second layer of shadow for a lot on this side of the body. But before we do that, we can actually, I'm actually gonna use my dry brush here to pick up a little bit of the excess. So if I get a little bit of turquoise, let's see, and to mix turquoise, all you really need is blue and green. That's it. So if you don't have it already in your palette, whatever palette you're using, just get a little bit of blue and green and just go ahead and fill in the eyes, because they're kind of like a blue-green eye. And that's both of them, both of the eyes. Now at first it'll look a little weird for two reasons. One is the paint always dries lighter. But then what you do is you rinse your brush, dry it off completely, and then pick up the excess color on one side of the eye. And what that'll do is it'll give it a more three-dimensional look. Now while it's still wet, it'll keep pulling back. So you just need to do it a couple of times. Like that. There we go. Same on the other side. Just kind of pick up that excess. Because if you ever look at an eyeball, obviously it's a sphere, so it's never an even distribution of color and light. There's always variance. And if you can capture some of that, it'll just make it look a little more realistic. Okay, so we're good on that. Now we're going to go back to our mixture here. Just grab some of it, and we're going to put it... Now, if you want to watch me do this before you do it yourself, because we've done a lot of work here so far, we don't want to ruin it. And it can be a little intimidating just painting over all of this. But what you're doing is you're grabbing that mixture and then just bringing it right on top. Like that. And bring it right on down. Like that. And you can immediately see the shadow effect that provides. And that's what we want. Because this portion is covered a lot more in shadow. And then just fading it out that way. And then getting that same mixture, maybe adding a little bit here in the face, like that. A little bit here in the brow ridge. On the other side. Maybe a little bit in the ear. And then rinsing my brush off, drying it off, and fading out those markings. So I like how this looks so far. I'm just going to step back. If you're, that's always a really good exercise, just to step back from your painting just to see how complete you think that it is. Okay, yeah, I think that looks great. I'm really happy with how that turned out. So that's it for that one. That took us a little over 23 minutes. But hopefully yours turned out just as well or better. And if you want to share it with me, just, tag me on all the social media. Username is the same. And if you have any questions, just leave me a message, leave me a comment, email me, whatever works. I usually respond within 24 hours. And I appreciate you. I'll see you on the next one.